Here we are. We've got another special guest. They're all special guests. This is a super supporter. Vancey, we all call him Vancey. Vancey 604, I think, is it?
604.
Vancey 604, and otherwise known as Johnny Vance, who has a very interesting backstory. Villain arc, which we will hear about later on. So welcome. What have you got here?
I decided to put a bit of a care package together for you.
Yeah, very good.
Just coming down, invited me to this lovely area down here in Bondi, so I sort of put this together for you. So yeah, just a few things that I hope you can sort of see and embrace as a gift from me to you.
Open it up.
Absolutely, go for it. Sir.
I like the decoration. We're going to have some close-ups on that. Any particular order?
Nope, go for gold.
This is a beautiful, expensive-looking book. When they used to make books like this.
Yeah, I just thought that given your background and.
I'm going to get my reading glasses. Oh, The Art of War and other classics.
Yeah, just Middle Eastern, philosophy, strategy. You'd be aware of that. And just thought you might. A man of literature as yourself?
I do. I am a reader. I do love reading. And this will be good. And I'm getting a bit sick of. I'm reading the Greek myths at the moment, but this will be very good. This will be good. Clearly, I'm the virtuous man who can love and who can hate others. That's good. I feel a little bit better now that I'm allowed to hate.
Glad you're.
I'm a bit sick of all this sort of like love everybody. What have we got here?
I just thought. This is something I picked up, and I thought of you. I remember you commented on a post I did with a chessboard, and I saw this, and I thought, well, just knowing a few guys in.
They're beautifully wrapped.
Oh, thank you.
You put a lot of effort into this.
I buy material sometimes because I have art projects that I want to do, and I go, but then it works better as wrapping paper, I think. So for a cologne or just an old Avon chess piece. That's the bishop, obviously, and
bishop.
Yeah, just thought maybe something, look at.
He looks a bit more like a soldier, but anyway, he's kind of a philosopher king, I think.
That's right.
Fantastic. There's no cologne in it.
No, I wasn't sure what you wore, David. I've never met you in the flesh.
Are you wearing the bishop? Yes. I like it. So, very cool though. The Blue Mountains.
The Blue Mountains Cup, and I just thought with the carabiner on it, be
I like the carabiner.
I thought it was pretty cool, and I'm like, I suspect David might like it.
I do, and they will have my very strong cups of coffee.
Yeah.
And I like the little origami. Did you do these yourself?
Yeah, it's peace cranes.
Very small.
I started doing them many years ago to deal with mental health, depression, and anxiety. And I felt that the mindfulness has worked really well. So I've been an advocate for it for about 10 years. So it's
When I was a kid, back in the sort of late 60s, it was this origami was quite a big deal.
Yeah.
It seems to have died out now, but everybody kind of did it. Not so much for mental health, but it was sort of it was kind of funny. It was one of those sort of fads that was quite big, It's funny the things you remember. Then I'd forgotten about it until I saw it recently, some of the stuff that I saw online. When I was in the rehab or the sort of PTSD hospital, they had colouring books. Which a lot of people liked. It was quite good because everyone sit around together and kind of chat, and I guess it's something that you would do without it gives you an excuse to chat without sort of it being too intense kind of thing. You can sort of like, you're colouring your book and you can say, did you hear about this, or colour. It seems to kind of work rather than having a full-on discussion with someone.
Yeah.
Eye contact.
I think they call it active listening.
Active listening,
that's what it's called.
Yeah, I'm not very good at colouring in, and I get, especially when there's really complicated things where you've got to like do a different. I'm like, that'll do, close enough.
Oh, I'm the same. I'm colouring in the lines is it?
And these are the famous stickers. Now I don't even have. These are the first ones I've had actually.
Oh, okay, yeah, I remember.
I didn't want to ask for myself, but I'm pleased to see that. I always love. For those of you who follow my Instagram, you would have seen plenty of all Vanceys. Oh, Justice for McBride, in fact, is the name of the Instagram. And look, they've even got a little origami. I like to think that that's sort of a ninja attacking.
Sure. It's subjective art, so absolutely.
Looks like a ninja cockroach about to come in for the attack.
That's awesome. Okay, that's what they are now, ninja cockroaches. That's so cool.
We can see if we can get the fans and see how many we can get these stuck around the around Australia. I saw you. Did you put one down at Parliament House? Somebody did.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
I saw one in one of the polls outside Parliament House.
Wow, that's famous. That's great.
Yeah, no, I think we should be able to get these about. I've changed to the white glasses. I don't know if that's going to make any.
No, I think it's
fridge magnets.
Yeah, they're great, and you can stick them on anything in public, and it's not considered vandalism because it's a magnet. So,
for some reason, I think my car must be too plastic. We've got these L plates for my daughter magnetized. They don't stick on the car.
No.
So we'll see if they can work. Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
I'm very happy with this book.
Awesome.
Look at that. I mean, you can't see it, but that's a little bit like the picture that we just covered up.
Wow.
Of the riding the horse in Afghanistan. Yes, here we go. There's lots of. It's funny. There is a lot of wisdom in this kind of thing. Yeah,
Huge amounts.
Yeah.
Consider I bought the original version of the other day, and it's so thin, but it's one of those books where you flip it to any page, and it's got wisdom and it's got coping strategies to deal with stuff.
I haven't seen the coping strategy, but I must admit, even though I don't follow it closely, and you kind of laugh at people that do. You do use some of the rough techniques to say when your enemies expect you to do this, do something else, and when they and I've certainly done that, to certainly surprise them, be unpredictable. That's definitely what I take that away. I think that's right, sort of retreat when they expect you to attack when they expect you to retreat, etc. And appear to be strong when you're weak, and appear to be weak when you're strong. All of that kind of stuff. Was one of the reasons, even though I need a fair bit of courage, but I want them to pursue the case. It's a bit like I don't know if you know the Battle of Little Bighorn, when it was a massacre, really. General Custer, war hero from the Civil War, got massacred because they tricked him. He thought he was out there to massacre the Indians, and they tricked him he followed a small party of Indians thinking he was onto, going to go and kill some women and children, and he suddenly rode super fast and couldn't stop, and then he's suddenly in a trap.
He's running before he walked.
Yeah. So that's, to a certain extent, that's what I want to do with my own case, in that they're pursuing me, but then they're going to be in court, call on the witnesses, and actually have to answer questions: who knew what, when, and in their haste to try to pursue me, they might be in for more than they bargained for when they get into court.
Sure.
I think they've probably worked that out now, and that's why they're playing the national security card.
You see that a fair bit, just on that point. You see people will go to great lengths to cover up a lie.
Yeah.
Until it's in front of a judge. And then as soon as the pressure comes on with the judge, with someone of that, in that area, they crumble, because they go, well, am I going to lie in front of a judge? Because obviously... It's
funny how it works. It's something about it gets into our psyche, because, yes, people... who, as you say, are very brave about lying in public life or in normal life. Some people, and when you'd think, who's going to care about swearing on the Bible or giving an affirmation? But people do seem to care. People, you can see that they do get nervous. They do slip up. And some people don't. The pathological liar is usually pretty good in court, unfortunately. But most people do find it. They don't find it easy to lie to a judge, and so we'll see. And that's one of the advantages I've got in my case, is that I've always had a warts and all approach to say this is what I did. You know, I think we'll talk about later, but I had a drinking problem, a drug problem. So there's nothing that they can say, and especially being a barrister, that they can say, oh, what about this? Aha, you haven't thought of that, and to say it's all in the public record, you know, and to be able to say, yeah, that's right. You know, that wasn't perfect. This is what I was trying to do, but sure, I can see your point of view. And to come across as as a barrister, I've seen cases where people. I was defending a guy, and he'd he'd said something obnoxious to someone. I think it was his ex-wife. And she on a previous occasion, she'd slashed his tyres.
Right, yeah.
And I thought this was the case winner. But to say, you know, you've already been convicted for slashing his tyres or something. And she was like, yep, I did it. I was angry with him and I did it. And it was a good lesson for me because the judge found for her and against me, and you'd think that he would sort of look down on her, but he was like, no, I found her an honest person because she's just said, yeah, I did that. One day I did that, I was really angry. But that doesn't mean I'm not telling the truth about it. In fact, if anything, it made her more credible because she was prepared to admit something bad that she'd done, and she just said, yeah, I was angry and I slashed his tires.
Yeah, get in front of the story.
And then she and then when she said, but this is what happened on this day, he was like, well, I find it satisfactory. And so, yeah, that's... anyway, tell us about your story and how you came to hear about my case and how you came to support us.
Sure. So, I mean, I come from military background. My grandfather fought in 3 wars for the Navy, Old Navy. Did 33 years service, retired. My father then picked up the torch. I did 22 years in the Air Force, so that sort of background. I basically grew up half my life as a child really loving the military. You know, go to military bases. My father was a navigator on P3s, Orions. So I'd see that side of it, real rock star lifestyle, like if you love like aviation. Like my third word, like my father used to read me aviation books, and my third word was helicopter. So mum, dad, helicopter. That's sort of how really in that area, like my mind was. So things happened with my father and Defence Force, and all of a sudden we're on the other side of it, where Defence are defending the people that were dishonest about situation with my father, which there's documentation on it.
I know about this case, but we'll talk about that later, because it's actually, I didn't put 2 and 2 together, but Vance versus the Commonwealth is one of the, ironically, is one of the cases we study at in military law school sort of thing.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, the way they teach it is not, you know, they're even dishonest in that. And they were kind of, when I first read it, it hadn't fully finished, I think, but they were sort of saying that this is, you know, the military, this is the way we remove someone from command sort of thing. And it wasn't until later, they don't publicise the sort of ACT Supreme Court judgments which lambast the Defence Force and say, you know, they've covered up documents, they've hid evidence, they've done that. Crispin's judgment.
Yeah.
They don't teach that. Which isn't that disgusting?
Well,
to think that they're still fighting some sort of rearguard action and not owning up to it. Admittedly, that was the department more than the ADF, but still. It's a double head. The ADF has got to wear the damage for the department.
I'm actually I was going through it with John Little, who was also one of the lawyers involved in it. Unfortunately, he passed away. But it is interesting, and I guess because it is pertaining directly to my family, there is a personal element to it. And it's like, okay, I want to get as much truth and get this as honest as possible. And then obviously, you know, there's another side to it, and there's, you know, it's like a hydra. You hit one area, and then, you know, you go, okay, I got that, and then another pops up. So it is quite interesting from that perspective. Even hearing that now, I go, oh, okay, so that's how they're doing it.
Yeah, no, it's funny, but those viewers will understand that there was a legal case. Johnny's dad was an equivalent of a general in the Air Force, and he was in charge of a base. And there was some sort of kerfuffle, and the Air Force sort of summarily, against their procedures, they removed him. And he fought back. This is obviously just a potted history of thieves, get anything wrong, but it became quite illegal. And eventually he got damaged, obviously incredibly, a bit like my own case, but this is in that it was long running, it was bitter, and it was all sorts of counter. And eventually a judge in the Supreme Court of Canberra really lambasted the Defence Force and said, you have totally behaved so badly in this regard. You have never produce the evidence I've asked you to, not just in relation to Johnny's dad, but you have defied the judge in doing what I told you to do. And really, it was a forerunner of things to come. And it's something actually, funnily enough, that I want to use in my own case to say, because defence have seemed to have rehabilitated their image to say, oh no, we don't lie. We would never sort of, try to put out propaganda or something like that. But clearly they got caught out, and I think it's actually, it's the rule rather than the exception, in that they got caught out in that case, lying and obfuscating and treating someone absolutely against what their own manual. And it's a bit like in my case in Afghanistan, the manual says this, and manual says X, we're doing Y. And then when I'm going, hang on, what's the explanation? They're going, shut up, it's above your pay grade. In the sense that, and it's particularly bad as a legal officer because it's a law-free zone, and what they call policy, which is basically political bullshit, runs everything. But they teach people like me, oh, we've got to do things by the law, and we've got to, give people procedural fair, blah, 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 and there's a manual. But they've got, and what is particular adds insult to injury, this will ring a chord with you, is that when I complained and said we are not doing things by our own manual, they're angry, even though they'd spend, I don't know how many thousands teaching me about the manual, for want of a better expression. When I said, hang on, we're not following the manual, they're like, oh my God, put him in jail. It's enough to send you a bit nutty.
The old saying, shoes and feet, they don't seem to get that.
Anyway, I cut you off. Now, where were you? So your dad, at what stage, how old were you when your dad's going through all these problems with the Defence Force? And obviously it spans 10 years at least.
So that started really, I'd say, end of 1994, going into 95. So I was about 12 years old. I was 12 years old at that point.
PH.
Yeah. So we're on base in Malaysia, and they're basically kicking up a kerfuffle about his management style.
At Butterworth. Is Butterworth?
Butterworth, yeah, Malaysia. That's right, yeah. And so what also happened, which was really interesting, which I like to advocate for the families and children of anything gone through with this, because when you're on the receiving end as a child of anything by grown adults that has malicious intent, can really be unnerving. And it can affect somebody's, it affected me in my formative years, because what was also happening was the wives they were the bus monitors. So we would get a bus into school, and we would then, they would monitor. So they monitor the kids on there. And I noticed that there were a lot more complaints about me, per se, than the other kids. And I look back on that now as I go as a teenager, but there was...
No, I think you're right. There's a lot of psychology, once you're singled out, once you're different to other people, there's a pile-on effect. Yeah, no, and I worry about my own kids, and they support me now, especially the younger one. But they, at first, when you might have felt this the same subconsciously, even if you wouldn't admit it, when your dad's in trouble or whatever. Being a child, you can't help but think he must have done something wrong. You still like your dad as sport, or you're not sure. Or the flip side is we live in a very bad world where good people get punished. Now that's a pretty hard thing for a 12-year-old to have to, either way, it's incredibly damaging. I've got this other guy, Daniel Duggan, I don't know, it was someone the US want to put in jail. He's a pilot. They say he was trained in China. Now he's got 6 kids, all, 18 to a baby, I think. And you can only imagine what they're going through,
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, so you're 12 and going on till 20, I guess, because it took a while.
Yeah, I mean, that happened. Then what then?
They removed him, didn't he? But then he started fighting in the civilian court.
Yeah, once again, there's aspects of it that I can't really answer for because it was in his fight as far as the timeline's concerned.
No, I don't. We're not expecting any. We're not trying to rerun the case. We're just trying to give the viewers an idea of what you went through.
Sure, no.
Rough, broad brush.
Yeah, cool. So we moved back to Canberra then, and that's when they basically tried to pull his pension, and we're sort of
his pension.
Well, this is the thing. Like the lawyers fought this one and won it, but he.
Go figure. That shows you what dogs they are. Why would you?
I mean, a 22 year service in the Defence Force, and very few.
They haven't even taken my pension, even though they're trying to put me in jail forever. But they haven't tried to take my pension.
Well, that's a scary thing because my mother, she wasn't working at the time. She ended up getting a job at the hospital. But it was one of those situations where we come back to Canberra, we were completely out of our element. There was no, we weren't involved with the military anymore. So that lifestyle is completely gone. And basically, it felt like I was on Mars. I've moved to a place where there's a majority of people there, public servants, going to school. And
I hear you. That's why I can't live in Canberra. It's a nice place and whatever, but you feel if you're fighting with it is a bit like an organism, and you're like, the virus, where the rest of the organism is trying to destroy you, in the sense that, you feel very out of place if you're not part of the machine, and if you're a little bit different. It's quite clear that obviously there is some sort of there's more than that meets the eye with some of its parts, because you feel it's not a friendly place to be outside, or formerly part of the machine, but not anymore.
Definitely. And I, as that age, I was 14 when we went back to Canberra. So to get an understanding of the world like that, I mean, I basically just isolated and started becoming really involved in art and music because there's things I could do by myself. And I didn't see eye to eye with the other kids at school, because a lot of them are kids of public servants. I went to St Edmunds, which is a rugby union school as well, and I was 50 kilos dripping wet. So they weren't going to put me in a rugby team, so I couldn't get involved there. I was trained in cross country, but they didn't have a cross country thing. So a lot of my interests were gone when I moved back to Canberra. So then I just went into music and art. But it was definitely...
It's a problem and even service children like you, you are like aliens. I've always said this in the sense that you can wear civilian clothes, but you're not the same as the civilian, generally. I mean, that's what you just think differently. You've grown up differently. Everything is different. So I can imagine. I only imagine what it would have been like for you. So your dad's going to court every day, or pretty much every week, or something like that.
Well, this is the thing that really rattled me was we didn't talk much about that because it was such a foreign thing to have happen in your family all of a sudden. But my mum did come to me one day and she said, "Look, you could come home from school and your father will be in jail. Okay, we won't have any money, won't have any," because he ended up getting his pension back. The lawyers fought for that. She was in the process of getting a job, but it was that reality that's
heartbreaking to hear that, because that's obviously the case with me as well. But I mean, to tell that to a child is tough, and I know that it's for being the father in that position, in the position of your father rather than you. It's very, very, it's heartbreaking to know that your children have been told that, and even though you think you're in the right, they don't understand that, and they just have to pay the price, and they have to have faith in you. But it's putting your children through a lot,
I look at it now and I go, he did the right thing, but
I'm sure he did.
And that's what I remember, and what the effect that it had on me. I like to say, you know, I'm here now talking to you. You know, I got through it. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. But there's also ways of getting through it. I look at it as an optimist now, because I'm like, okay, I can incorporate everything that I've learned. I can pass that knowledge on to people. I can show them that, okay, you can get through it. But the fight that you're going through at the moment, I've seen it. I've seen it with people like my father, and it breaks my heart, but I can't not support it. You know, like to be on board with it. That's why I do what I do. I don't know how much of an impact it has, but it doesn't matter. It's a selfless activity to support people like yourself. So I just have that.
It is very selfless. At first I was, I thought, because I had some people making documentaries, and it was quite funny, I thought for some reason that it was them when I heard about you, and they thought it was me. And they said, well, who's this guy, Justice? And I said, I thought it was you. And they were like, well, we thought it was you.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, well. And then we made contact. But it's you do it all at your own expense, which is terrific.
Sure.
And it makes me, and you send it out to people. It is, it's very humbling, whatever. But because I couldn't believe how much work you were going in to do it. You know,
it is a bit like a second job, but it doesn't feel like a job. Like my sole job at the moment is housekeeping, so that I can feel that. Like you get 6 hours into a housekeeping shift, and it's like, okay, I'm a bit tired. I'm 41. Okay, I can feel it in my bones. But it's quite effortless as far as going in and doing it. And also, I come from like a punk rock background, a do-it-yourself background. Like guys like Henry Rollins, Ian McKay, those guys, they did this. And they showed me. And I buy their books and I listen to their music. Mm-hmm. So they've passed on something to me, you know. And also, yeah, there's guys in Australia that do it as well. And it's not a huge thing, but it's enough to know, okay, it can be done, and it will create difference in some regard.
And all the things that make a big difference, they start small.
That's right.
You've got to persevere with it. I mean, look at. I've got my trusty crew members, and I used to have 6 viewers, 20 viewers. Most of them would have been cops and spies. Now we've had 15,000. And in total, whatever it is, 50,000 and 100,000. So yeah, but it started very small. But if you don't start small, and this is what I've always wanted to do, things like this. I've thought of ideas, this is why it's great to have a team, because to begin with, it's too much for one person. Mm-hmm. You just go a bit nuts. You feel a bit nuts. But yeah, some sort of bumper sticker type campaign to which has the ability to get people's imagination. I wanted to get. I thought of all sorts of crazy things, and you rule them out, and they don't work. And usually, you have to rely a little bit on just what works and what doesn't.
That's right. Yeah. That's it.
Action Man. I thought we could get people to buy Action Man and stick them in the back of their car like the nodding dogs, like they used to have when I grew up. You probably remember. Yeah. You remember the dogs in the back?
Yeah.
They've gone out of fashion for some reason. Bring back.
We can bring them back.
Bring back the nodding dog. It's but this is it, because and the glasses, it is it's obviously taken people's imagination, and we can try and push it out there a little bit more.
I wouldn't mind giving a bit of a shout out to Goran at Kill Your Persona, who I sent him some ideas for some band logos, and he killed it. Like, he was really good at it.
He came up with this.
I drew a basic picture.
Thank you. You can come and we don't know what we can do for you.
He's a champion.
Free subscription, which is free anyway.
At the moment, he's playing bass for Forest Hall, so they're keeping him occupied. Forest Hall with Miss Lab, and I just went and saw them live, so they're a big fan of that band.
Okay, and are they punk band?
They are. They're Miss Lab's good mates with one of your mates, friendly Jordan Shanks. So he got in contact with me over Instagram one time. He was asking about a guitarist I was worked with him previously, and just developed a friendship. So
that's
really
good.
Cool.
We have another connection with the guy that painted my portrait for the Outtro. He makes guitars.
Oh wow, that's awesome! He's a luthier.
Yeah, which is quite a skill, know. And so we might be able to get a little bit of a cottage industry together with all our different connections. You know, you forget. Just before you came on, I did a radio show, and I had a Green Senator, David Shoebridge, on as my guest. And because I'm so flat out all the time, I forget how many people I've got in the address book now that have called one overseas, well, because I can't be bothered. But yeah, who are interesting people and who are available. So I don't really have the time to organise it all, but I've met some amazing people as a result of this, and sometimes I have to, and I say that to convince myself because I forget. People like you, I'm never going to forget you. You've put your own effort into. It's quite, you know, it's quite amazing because when I first heard that, I thought, is this a spy from you know, what's the game here? Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're not now, but it's yeah, you've just been amazing. Yeah, you post every day. You know, you post in both ways. You put something up on your own on Instagram, and you also send them out to people. It's a lot of effort, and it's just because you heard about the case and you did some reading, and yeah, well, I guess that it's like when there's nothing like having had a personal experience of it yourself. And you don't even have to say much. When in the height of my fighting with the Defence Force, when a bit like your dad, I had no friends. I had no one on side, you know. And I had the forerunner to Jakey, wherever he is, which was Tashi the beautiful husky. And I had her outside McDonald's, and a guy came up to me and he said, "I can see you're a veteran," and he said, "I'm a Vietnam vet, and I know it's pretty hard." And I just started crying because we didn't say much, but I could tell that he was a bit damaged, for want of a better word. He was damaged by the wrong. He'd fought a battle anyway, and I, you know, we communicated without saying very much, and that was a beautiful thing. You know, it was a painful thing, obviously, but a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing like that kind of communication with someone who has been through, you know, what you've been through. Like my kids, you know, my kids would, if they're young yet, but they will eventually be able to understand what you went through, in the sense that but it's even harder for you as a child of someone fighting with a big machine, because for me and for your dad, there's something they can do, but as a child, there's nothing you can do. You know, and this is one of the reasons why I tweet so much, and it gives you some sort of empowerment to land a tiny punch on your enemy each day. And I've tried. Some people said, "Oh, you shouldn't tweet so much," or whatever. It relieves that pressure cooker, and just sitting silently. It'd be great. You'd be some sort of incredible Jesus figure if you could sit for 10 years silently waiting for your fate to be decided and not to be try to do something about it.
Absolutely.
You know? And that's not the military way anyway.
I would just say on that point, I remember getting picked up in Canberra by my father when I was 14, and seeing him. He had that 1,000 miles stare, and I was in the passenger seat of the car, and I saw a changed man. From 6 months prior to that, he was teaching me how to shave, and he was now engaged in a fight, which, you know, I remember seeing that, and at the time, I didn't know much about hate or revenge or anything, but I did. I wanted revenge. I wanted to do something, which the revenge turned to this, to being proactive, to taking a negative and turning it into a positive. Anybody that's going to fight a fight for the good, for the betterment, especially what you're doing with society, and this has the ability to change a lot of things. And I commend you. And
well, you get that, and it's good to hear you say that, because I sometimes think no one really understands, but it's fantastic that you understand the big, from small things, big things. Small injustices are often linked to big injustice or bad systems. You know. If a machine keeps punching out the wrong thing, you need to fix the whole machine. It's not a matter of just fixing the stamp or whatever. The machine may have a problem, but it was hard for me not to get emotional when you were start openly crying when you were telling that story, because that was me in reverse, in the sense that my kids were that age and they had to deal with me being all those things that you were talking about. I was always wandering around talking and thinking what I was going to do next, and for a little kid, it's hard, it's hard. The daddy, luckily they never lost faith in me. But
that's right.
But it must have been very hard for them. And I started crying myself once, because I was like, they were like, come and play on the trampoline like you used to do. We used to have this trampoline, and I was like, I was always, doing equivalent tweeting, or actually those days I was just sending emails to journalists or something. Mm-hmm. And it was always, because I really believed in what I was doing. And I said to the daughters, I said, come play on the trampoline. And I said, I'm just going to have to press send on this one more email. And I just started crying, because I just thought I heard in my own head that I'd said that exact word 10,000 times and just never, there was always one more email, one more text message, one more thing you could do, and yet I wasn't going to go and play on the trampoline with them. And, they didn't say, they never said anything, but it was, it's really hard when you are fighting a fight which is an important, it is an important fight, there's no doubt about it, but, and if you have to, the future of very important things, they can't, not the only one, there are doctors saving people's lives, whatever. There are plenty of people who do very, very important jobs, and you can't just drop it because your kids want you to play. But saying that, it is heartbreaking to slowly see the damage that is done, because you just don't have time for them. And they certainly, it's not so bad. Their childlike understanding is important. If you're a brain surgeon, perhaps they could deal with it. But when they kind of know that you're fighting with the government, and whether or not they want to say it, that everyone else thinks one thing and you think one, that's hard, because whether they say it or not, they begin to doubt whether you're the crazy one or whatever.
It's such a, gaslighting. It's become a lot more apparent to me, but looking back over the time where you've been gaslit by individuals in the government, and to be able to differentiate who is and who isn't, your enemies and your friends, is such a huge...
They sent me to, this is how disgusting the Defence Department, they sent me to a psychiatrist, and he was a civilian, and he was a professor or associate professor, and he was a very smooth kind of guy. Yeah, and he sort of said, he won my confidence over, put me on antidepressants, really slowed me down, but he also said, he said, you don't have a leg to stand, you can't be a whistleblower, basically, you don't have a legal leg to stand on. Which I thought was, he was so smooth that he didn't say it quite that obviously, but he did say, you can't be. And I was trying to argue with him. I didn't suspect that this was, I said, well, surely if doctors are killing patients in hospitals, you would be able, you can't tell me a non-disclosure agreement is going to stop you being able to report that. And he was like, oh, no. He tried to argue with me about it. And he also tried to gaslight me by saying, and again, you reckon, because he was a civilian and he had a lovely suit and he had nice rooms in Canberra, I didn't, even though he'd been recommended by the I had no choice, you didn't immediately, because I have so much respect for doctors, my parents were doctors and lawyers, I would never expect a senior psychiatrist who's passed to actually be working for the forces of evil. But this guy was, and he said, I think one of our first, I kind of laughed it off. He said, your only reason that you're complaining is because you've got a sense of entitlement about not being promoted, and it's all about your sense of entitlement. Now, it was like our first session, I think, and so he didn't know anything about me at all, but he'd been told that by Defence.
Yeah.
That was the line he was going to run with. And narrative. He was trying to put that in my head, a sense of entitlement. That's why I imagined war crimes cover-ups. It's like and they tried to, probably like with your dad as well. They backgrounded me. They had senior defence people speaking to the press gallery to run me down, and then it was even worse than normal because the press wouldn't run with the story, but they would just not take your story.
That's right.
You know,
yep, and negate.
And so you couldn't even follow up on it and saying that's bullshit, that's defamatory. They'd just not, you know. And that was without any anyone checking up on whether the defence were telling the truth or whether obviously that they had a conflict of interest because I was versus them. And so presumably the press gallery shouldn't have been just taking their opinion, but sometimes they were because the defence writer, one of the guys out of running, he was the defence writer for the certain newspaper. And so I guess, in order for him, it's so creepy, in order for him to get more and more exclusives from defence, he of course had to kiss their ass. And that if that meant running me down, he was going to do that because that would ingratiate himself so he could get a new Toyota Corolla.
Media mercenaries.
It just made your skin crawl. You just think you went into journalism so you could get a new second-hand kitchen in Canberra.
That's right.
Like, fuck, maybe you should have just sold photocopiers. If that's completely how hopeless and lack of any kind of moral compass that you have.
It's actually, once again, a really good point. And what I have learned, and what my father taught me was get a paper trail or get it in writing. So he was always active in saying, if you have a problem with the government, be very specific about where. And so with me, I had an issue with defence. I had an issue with the Chief of Defence. I had an issue with the Minister. So I ended up writing to the Minister in 2012. And so...
You did?
Yeah, I was... So what happened was, with that whole case, they ended up settling with my father, got a payout, but they wouldn't apologise because it's defence. So basically... I'm a working class guy. My last name is something to me. That and my rights. So, everything else is trivial as far as I'm concerned, But those two things are very important. So I ended up going, well, I don't care about money. I mean, I didn't see any of the payout, which is fine by me because I just work and that's where I get my money. But it really bugged me that I'm like, you can come into my life for 14 years and do this and you're just going to walk away. And it's like, no apology. So I ended up, it got to the point where I was suicidal, depressed, agitated. I was living in Canberra. I couldn't live in Canberra anymore. I ended up doing a massive sabbatical and just a hiatus. And I ended up in hospital over it. And from there, because I started to drink as well, like heavily, it's sort of part and parcel of resentment. And yeah, so
it's the medicine that stops you jumping off a cliff half the time.
That's the thing. It's a double-edged sword. But I ended up going to rehab, and it was Odyssey House, which is a really intense rehab, and they really break you down. And it came to the point they're like, you have to resolve this. Well, you have to do something. You have to put action in. So basically, I came up with the idea. I'll write to the minister, and that's an absurd idea because I'm like, I would like an apology. Or I'd like to be doing something within the solution there to get an apology. So basically, I wrote to the minister. The minister...
It shouldn't be. In a perfect world, it shouldn't be an absurd idea. I did the same thing. But anyway, we know how the real world works. So yes, tell us what happened.
So then the minister passed it down to the Chief of Defence, which was David Hurley at the time. And he issued an apology.
He did issue an apology, did he?
He did. It was actually a really surreal example.
He wouldn't have written it, someone else.
No, he signed it. It was that thing, and that in 2012. Absolutely. I base a lot of pretty much everything I do on this event because I went, well.
You think you can get him to write an apology?
Well, you know what? There's other stuff leading to this, which is why I really love democracy. I mean, to me. Democracy in this country, as I look at it, I go, well, people are arguing about the government. And I go back to what my father taught me, which was be specific. I'm angry at the Minister of Defence for supporting individuals within his department acting nefariously. Right to him. He's in charge of it. Your taxpayer dollars are going towards paying his salary or nice kitchen in Canberra or whatever. But right to them, it's legal. They have to respond. They've got a 20-day deadline to get either they respond or somebody within their department, their AV or their 2IC or whatever will respond. So with writing to the minister passed it to the Chief of Defence. General David Hurley issued me an official apology and an apology on behalf of the the Defence Legal Department. So basically apologise for everything.
They're pretty good.
You know, for a guy in rehab, and this is why democracy is a system that you can throw it against the wall and it'll recover really easily. I was an unemployed, recovering alcoholic in a rehab on the dole. That was the only way I could pay for it. I sent a letter to one of the highest people, someone in high power, and they've responded. So we've met, it's equalised. So we've met there. I've got, you know, I can't remember what I originally wrote, like the exact specifics, but it probably wasn't very assertive. I think I might have been a bit demanding. So I'm like demanding it, you know, the minister, you need to give me an apology. And he's looked at it and handed it to his Chief of Defence and gone, you want to deal with this one? And he's sat down and gone, yeah, I'm going to issue an apology. So it's pretty awesome. So yeah, I got a lot, like I said, I founded this helping other people understand that you can write to them and they will write back. There's communication. They're not rock stars. They're not hauled up in some ivory tower. They're accountable to the public, you know. So yeah, that's
Well, who was it? He wasn't Chief of Defence, was during your father's time. So he was apologising on behalf of the previous.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
he was.
He was apologising on behalf of them, which I think is big of him. He could have just really written.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised. They could have called the fixated persons unit.
Oh yeah, I mean that would have been so funny. Like rock up to the rehab and they're like, mate, this is a rehab for, you know, people that have led pretty nefarious lives. Like you could just fire into the crowd there. And
did it make you feel better? And did you start to improve?
Absolutely. This is the thing that I really advocate for, and there's other examples of it which we might get to talk about. But yeah, it meant that I had a voice. You know, and that democracy is alive and well, okay, and nobody's going to come along and say, well, actually, I did write to Dutton, I'll get to that later, but there's another...
and that didn't, well, I was going to say, that's all very well when it works, but what happens if you get ignored?
Well, I've got a solution for that too. So, yeah, so that's from 2012 to now, 2023, and I've done things in between that space.
You started to get well, though.
I did, yes, getting back to that, absolutely. Like, it meant that I could hold my head up again because my family name, like, I've gone and advocated for that. I've put a piece of paper that is signed by now the Attorney General in place where if somebody comes along and tries to pull that shit again, sorry to use a swear word, but there's now documentation signed by a public official that says, yeah, we did that and we had to apologise, and we had to apologise to this guy, and yeah, we don't want to do that again. But it also states that's a legal document. So
but they have to apologise, because the judge found in your father's favour. He won the case.
Yeah, Crispin did, but
so,
they swore black and blue, and I also had that discussion with my family and a number of people. I'm like, I'm going to get them to apologise, and they're like, they're not going to apologise.
Yeah, I must admit, I was surprised.
So yeah,
but because it's all run by legal people, and they would have thought they said, oh, now he's going to sue, or now it's going to, and they are not that smart, because it was actually the smart thing to do was to apologise, and that's what a true leader,
that's right,
does.
That's right.
People make mistakes, but unfortunately, the modern defence force, and again, I blame usually bad advisors. They never want to admit they've never made a mistake on anything.
That's right.
And they double down.
That's
they double down the whole time.
They do with public money, with taxpayer money, and it ends up costing, like my father's case was, the Leonard bill was about 60.
Well, they never. You sort of, even apart with just mistakes, look at the submarine fiasco.
Oh yeah.
You know, we were going to have French submarines, and the French said, "Oh, we said we'd like your submarine," and they said it's great, it's got nuclear power, and we said, "Oh, we don't want nuclear power. Build us the same submarine without nuclear power," And then 10 years later, whatever, once they start getting going, we say, we're not going to buy a submarine. And they say, why not? And we say, because we want one with nuclear power.
Oh, yeah.
Now, you reckon someone...
We want one with the power windows.
You reckon someone would have been sacked? But no, they haven't even apologised.
Same with the Collins class.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, you reckon that someone, even if they like to make scapegoats, everybody, you reckon that they would have found someone to say, they just say, oh, well, this is what Scott Morrison wanted. But no one. No one gets sacked. There's no mistakes at the top of the Defence Force.
No one you can admit they're
It's
wrong.
a bit like art. Your art teacher saying there's no such thing as a mistake.
Yeah,
You can be the Chief of Defence Force and you can stuff up its own way, but you don't make a mistake.
Oh, it all rolls down.
Policy.
I've dealt with middle management in defence about stuff, and it's so much different. And then I've gone to the top, and it's just a different world. So
if I was going to call out the senior leadership for lying, I had to start being honest. It's a bit like I have to start being honest in my own life, in uncomfortable ways. You know, it's a bit like that Jim Carrey movie. Yeah, it's a bit like that. I started telling the truth in pretty much everything, even, you know, which is, you know, pathologically honest, someone called me, and they meant that as kind of an insult, but I mean, I see it as kind of a compliment, even though it's a bit uncomfortable, but just to sort of say, you have to call it out, and your conscience, if you become sort of a good person, your conscience makes you. Conscience kind of says, you know, you can't call out other people for spinning their story if you're going to spin your own story.
Absolutely, the accountability of doing the right thing when no one's around.
But if you do it, it's powerful. And I think there's a real power in truth. And this is why I think I'll ultimately win. As long as you are absolutely truthful, you've got to win in the end.
You don't need to defend the truth.
You've been there. Have to remember. It's like a little tiny cube with nuclear powered. You know, it's small, but it can't be broken. You know, you will have, and all of the spin and the advertising campaigns and frou-fra that they try to put on top of it, it's not going to work. And you look at the sort of the major things that happened in the 20th century, for example, civil rights in South Africa, civil rights in America, or whatever, is something which it was obviously people of whatever skin colour deserve to have the same rights. It's just, no matter how much kind of spin they try to put on it, oh, history and this and that, and what, it was never going to fly eventually. And no matter how the secret police in South Africa were terrible, but despite all the money and all the spin and all the, they were going to lose, and they were always going to lose. And even a man in jail was going to beat them, even though he was in jail. Now that's the power of truth.
Absolutely, with Mandela, yeah. In rehab they taught me what doesn't come out in the rinse comes out in the wash. You know, that's how I look at it. I'm like, if it's the truth, even though I might have 80% of people going against me, I know that's the truth. And I will follow through with that because I know that will dwindle down, you know. Yeah,
it's a hard road, and this is why you have to hang out with other people, and this is probably why you've driven to help me, and because you recognise fellow travellers.
Yes.
And it is lonely. It is lonely. I mean, it's been good for me to, especially a fellow person on the road of recovery.
Yeah.
And they say, I felt pretty rubbish today. I felt pretty rubbish yesterday. And they say that the best way to help someone is talking to a newcomer, or you know that for those of you who don't know the fellowship of alcoholics, you would help someone else who was having a worse day than you, basically.
Yeah.
And either they're just trying to give up alcohol or drugs or whatever, but talking, and there's something it's a simple thing, and it sounds like sort of self-help bullshit, but it does really work. You get off your own case, ask someone else how they're going, or even just listening to them. You don't even have to ask.
That's right.
And that it makes you feel better. It gets you off your own case, which makes you feel better.
Absolutely.
I feel better having spoken to you.
Awesome, man. Likewise, it's that common ground, meeting at common ground, going, hey, I'm here, you're here.
Yeah.
We're all right.
Helping each other. I mean, that's a good one for veterans all round. I mean, speaking to other veterans and just being there for them. This is one of the things that makes me angry about ANZAC Day coming up. And particularly, I was in the midst of my most bitter fighting, hand-to-hand fighting with Defence Force in 2015, with the 100th anniversary of Gallipoli. And in Gallipoli, there's really all the brass, all the most disgusting politicians in uniform and all of the odious public servants were in Gallipoli. You know, flying first class, rows and rows and rows. And yet, and there's no real soldiers in Gallipoli anymore. Some of the guards, you know, there's the people that went there 100 years ago are dead and they're gone. But they're real soldiers or service people doing it tough in old people's home, rehabs, bus shelters. And what they would give for someone to come and have a cup of tea. So rather than go to the cenotaph on next, well, it's not going to be out in time for. But yeah, next Anzac Day, you know, don't get up at dawn and go to a marble statue where there's nothing there. The dead people are not there.
That's right.
But go and see a real veteran. Have a cup of tea with them. And they come in all different shapes and sizes, some old, some young, some homeless, and they would love company. You know, I hate this sort of window dressing, like, oh, you know, we will remember them, you know, like the sun's coming up. But how about if you're really going to remember the people that have come, why not actually remember the ones that are still here? Because they could do with that.
I actually have a share on that one. My grandfather, like I said, he's 33-year veteran, and he retired, and he had really horrible post-traumatic stress disorder. And I only saw him a few times before he passed, but he died due to consumption, so alcohol. He also had cancer, but he basically got out of the service, and within about 5 years he was gone, because there wasn't anything in place for people to come and see him and check up.
Just treated it with a booze, self-medication.
That's right. Yeah, and I remember seeing him, and the fight, I could see it as a kid. I could see it in his eye, the fight that he had to be normal around his grandchildren, and then to be battling this. And there is, like, exactly, homeless veterans, that is a huge issue, and that's been brought up in the media.
And so often the politicians standing in front of the cenotaph, they're doing it for their own benefit. They want the photo opportunity of, here I am standing in front of the cenotaph with some twit, you know, with all the brass, standing in front of the cenotaph, but they're not doing anything practical for real veterans.
And that's, I mean, as a
photo opportunity.
That's right.
Photo opportunity, patriotism, yeah.
As a civilian, you're going through these things with defence, and then they offer services that are either obsolete or they're not current, they're not updated. Defence haven't looked after that side of it. So it is, like in your situation, you're out of defence, but they're not offering it.
They love photo. If I'd killed them myself, is what they wanted, the first thing they would have done was written out a huge check, got one of those big politicians' big checks, gone to my wife and with the press there. To say, oh, this is such a tragic case. Here we are. They did that to one other person who couldn't get benefits. This is and then he killed himself. And then they came around with this big check of $1 million to give to his widow or his wife or his sister or something. I don't know if he had a widow. That because it got in the media. And so they're like, oh my God, how are we going to fix this? Get a big check. You know, this was someone that they had denied benefits to until he killed himself, and then they said, oh my God, we've got to get on the front. And that's the reality of the Australian Defence Force. One of the things that came out in the Ben Roberts-Smith defamation trial, and this was just unconnected to any war crimes allegations, was that one of the soldiers said, we know that Ben Roberts-Smith wasn't down for the VC. He was like, you know, he was on the list, short list perhaps, but he wasn't at the top. It was bumped up because the PR people from the minister's office thought he was so good looking and he spoke well.
That sounds so defense.
And imagine like the SAS bloke who got bumped over, who actually deserved it. You know, can you imagine how much that just makes your blood boil? And,
absolutely.
And then Bob Roberts was trying to say, oh, he was just jealous. No, he wasn't jealous. He was just outraged that the PR people had the power to do that based on, absolutely abomination of defence principles, but to actually do that because the minister would make the minister look better. Well, it makes this handsome man.
The irony of it is now they're getting called out for that particular behaviour, and it makes them look even worse.
Well, will they get? Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, the whole house of cards will fall down on their heads. But and I'm an optimist. But I mean, they've got so many spin doctors who are not running the. You see what's happening with the submarines. They do have an ability to shut up the truth. Mm-hmm. But let's hope. Thanks to you, we are helping getting that out there. What's next for you?
Well, at the moment, I took a short break from doing the sticker campaign, and in that time, I really reassessed what I was doing in relation to helping people and being an advocate for what's going on with the victims over in Afghanistan, or the families of the victims over in Afghanistan. So what I did over that period of time, which was a couple of months, is I wrote to a number of the hierarchy in the Australian government. So I wrote to the Minister for Defence, I wrote to the Deputy Prime Minister, and I wrote to the Chief of Defence.
You've got a pretty good success rate with your letters. So.
Well, I mean, I also back it up with the letters that I have previously. So what I wrote, I was interested in what they were doing in relation to something that had come up.
The compensation.
Yeah, I know.
So it's a good point, because they said they were going to pay compensation, and it's almost worse than they didn't.
That's right.
And that, can you imagine what the Afghans think of us? I know when I second guess myself, I sometimes go back and say, what would the Afghans think?
That's right.
And of course, living in our society, it never even comes up. But yeah, you can imagine what they think of us, and the idea that we kill their people pretending we were heroes. Then we admit it under some sort of pressure. Then we say we're going to pay compensation. Then we don't. And then we try to put put me in jail. I mean, what will the Afghans think?
It's insane.
And we look down on them as being sort of primitive, savages, and yet they look
quite the opposite.
I know. You can imagine what they think.
Well, that was the interesting fact. I got into this like being a witness in the Brereton Report. There were two reasons that I could have done it. One was for revenge. The other one was for the right reasons, which is to be an advocate for the truth and to make sure that we're accountable. I'm accountable as an individual. I can't speak for anybody else. So that brought me to the point of going, well, I'm not happy with the fact that the government aren't compensating. What am I going to do? So I wrote to all of them, and I got a response back from the Deputy Prime Minister, and basically outlined, he thanked me, which was very nice to get a thank you from the Deputy Prime Minister. But also he outlined what they were doing.
To pay compensation.
To pay compensation. He was transparent, which is the sole purpose. One, that I wouldn't want people over the other side of the world where we had done the wrong thing to think that the people of Australia would stand for that. I won't, and there's more good people in this country than there are.
There's a lot of good people. Well, they write to me all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. You've seen it in the flesh,
and you are one of them. But don't burn yourself out.
Nah, I mean that was the thing. Like I got that, and I went. That's the power of being proactive. As one person,
that is true.
I have people around me,
but you got a response, and that makes you feel better. I mean, they did respond. You're not down there in the pub going, "Oh, goddamn government."
That's right.
You've actually written something, got a response, and then you might not be satisfactory, but then you can move on to step two.
Well, that was I mean, to see that this government will answer to a civilian, to somebody, a taxpayer, in that way. That's important. The way as well I was saying with Dutton is I wrote to Dutton about this issue as well, Peter Dutton, and he didn't respond. So I reported him to the Ombudsman. So I'm like, meh, that's, if you don't...
Well, credit where credit's due. There's Richard Miles apparently responded. They do have a plan to pay compensation, so that's good.
Yeah, they're onto it. And but yeah, I mean, coming back to the whole point of, like yourself, you're a person in a fight. You're not alone, and you're doing amazing work. And I believe that will go to the next generation, to your kids. That will flow on, and we will create a better system. We will create a better environment, because that last one was toxic, like what has been built, and that's falling away. It's old guard. So
I love it. I love your optimism, and you've made me feel strong. So thank you very much. I think we'll wind it up there.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vancey, and thank you for my book, The Art of War.